Welcome to Community Closeups, a webinar series highlighting the unique and talented individuals in our community. As always, alongside me, my good friend, co-host, David Warner. David, we're gearing up for conference season. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm excited. We've got a string of SharePoint Saturdays in front of us. We're sitting right now in the beginning of September, heading to the mid-September. We've got SharePoint Saturday LA, and then New England, and then Denver. You and I are speaking on a joint presentation together at all three of those. So we've got, as you called it, the tour.
It
So I'm
is the
excited for
tour
that.
across the US, as far west and as far east as you can go.
That's right. Yep. It's going to be fun. Then after that, we've got Ignite. And as you know, we got some good news. Our Community Closeups was chosen as one of the podcasts for Ignite. So we've got some special guests that has agreed to be our guests at that recording at Ignite. Stay tuned for more information on that. We'll be announcing that soon, but some very cool and exciting guests. I'm really excited. Hope you are too.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm more excited actually about today's guest because I've followed him for years. I've been on his blog hundreds of times, and he's a huge member of our community. Hugo Bernier, how are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from Quebec City, and I moved to Ontario to learn to speak English, and I just never went back. I started my own consulting company when I was 16, and after a failed career as a supermodel and an Olympic athlete, and I honestly never thought I would work in IT. I wanted to study in medicine. I worked as a chef, and I just happened to be coding for fun. And it never occurred to me that people would actually want to pay me to actually write code. So it wasn't until a bunch of my friends who were actually studying to do software engineering who kind of smacked me across the head and said, "What are you doing? Like, you should be working in the industry." And so that's what I've been doing ever since. I've been pretty much an independent consultant my whole life, except for some short stints with McKinsey and Company and other companies like that. But that's really where I learned to be. I used to be that geek that if you didn't understand what I was talking about, you were wasting my time. But when I started working with McKinsey, I learned to really be able to talk about the business side of things and understand the business value. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Awesome. So you moved from French-speaking world to Toronto, which is so different. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
multicultural city. There's lots of Southeast Asian influence there. What was that transition like when you went from Quebec?
It was tough because I was used to I was used to saying hi to everybody and enjoying nice long lunches and having coffee and when I first moved to Ontario and first dinner I went to, I ordered appetizers and main course and they delivered everything all at once. And I was just so offended because like, no, I'm here for 3 hours, 4 hours, like I'm gonna have dinner, right? It was a huge adjustment. Even like saying hi to, I'd see someone on the street and trying to be friendly and say hi, like, people almost wanting to pepper spray me, because you just don't do that in Ontario. So it was tough. But it's interesting because I use a lot of the things that I used to do in Quebec with the lifestyle and going out and enjoying coffee. I've turned that into part of how I deliver my projects. I'll take the team out with my clients and I'll say, let's go for coffee, and we'll have a mini Scrum meeting while we're having coffee.
You're from Quebec City or somewhere
Yeah,
around
Quebec
there,
City.
right?
Yeah.
So if no one's ever been there, can you talk about what it's like? Because it is a fantastic place to visit. It has so much European influence there.
Yeah.
The city itself is just really nice old buildings. Can you talk about what Quebec City's like? Because I think it's a really interesting place to visit.
It's for me to go back. I find it's very weird, even though I grew up there, because it's like you just dropped in the middle of the Game of Thrones set or something. It's like, there's castles and there's old buildings and people, walking around, enjoying, coffee and things like that. It's just a different lifestyle. People like to relax and have fun and be friendly to each other. So I mean, honestly, if someone knocked you out and transported you to Quebec City, you'd think you're probably in France or something.
Now you have kids as well, right? You're married with kids?
Yes, I have 3 kids, a daughter who's 13, and I have 2 sons who are 11 and 9, and
Were they
they're
born in Toronto, or did they
they
have to
were
move and transition with you?
they were born in Toronto. They went to bilingual school for the longest time until recently. Both my youngest sons are autistic, so we had to take out the whole bilingual out of the equation because it was just a little bit too much.
And that brings up another topic. Is you are autistic as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So I find that fascinating. Can you talk about that a bit? So I mean, you started a business when you were 16. It seems like regardless of the challenges, you have done quite well. And honestly, you are one of the most influential SharePoint people out there, in my opinion. Can you talk about some of those things, like what those challenges were? Or...
Yeah. Well, remind me to give you your money later for saying that. No, I mean,
it's all honesty.
Thank you. So I guess when I was growing up, what I have would have been called Asperger's as opposed to autism. But the term Asperger's hasn't been used since 2013. So I like to call it autism light. I do have some quirks. I mean, autism is a developmental disorder that is usually experienced with difficulties with social interaction and nonverbal communication. And usually people who are autistic or have Asperger's have a tendency to experience repetitive patterns or of behavior and interest. So they'll fall in love with one thing or very few things, and they'll just focus on that one thing. For me, it was coding and food, but it could be different things for different people. And the weird thing about the way I perceive the world is I really do have to apply a process to everything I do. I have to look at everything one piece at a time, which is kind of weird because if you consider that I've worked as an independent consultant, every week I could be going to a new client with new set of problems and new challenges. But what was constant with all the clients is it was always different. And so I just learned to apply, my processes and my methodologies to everything. So this is how I solve a problem. This is how I do requirements. This is how I, and just having these processes kind of became my safety blanket. And so I kind of turned my quirks into my secret, if you will.
And what you said on your blog, you have an about me. In that section, it talks about your no nonsense approach to things, right? So can you talk about that a bit?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because the majority of the clients that I work with, by the time they approach me, they've usually failed at implementing a solution 2 or 3 times before. So when they bring me in, they're desperate, and I typically will be very frank with them, and I'll say, look, you've tried this before, you haven't been successful, so I don't want to hear things like, well, that's not the way we do things, or this is how we've always done things, because obviously that hasn't worked. I I do play up the autism card sometimes, just as a way to say, like, to give me a carte blanche to say whatever I need to say. But you know, I think that that's kind of what I need to do, because again, if you've tried to do something 3 times and you haven't been successful, why are we trying to do exactly the same thing?
That's
And
the
that's
definition of insanity, right?
exactly. And I mean, I see that all the time in the IT world. Like why are we doing an IT project like it's the first IT project we've ever done every single time? Oh, we don't need to worry about QA, or we don't need to put buffers, or we don't need to, oh, we don't need requirements. We'll just do as is.
Agile.
So-
It's called agile.
so, yes, because when you do agile and you don't understand what you're going to build, it's really called fragile.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, that's good.
You had mentioned something earlier though, that you were a chef at one point. So you don't see that natural, like usually it's not like, well, I'm going to become a chef and then I'm going to code. So I want to know a little bit more about your chef experience, because we all love to eat, right? So what, like, was there a specialty to the chef a specialty to your style of cooking, or what did you like to do, cook the most, or tell us a little bit about that.
It was one of those things where when I was a kid, I would ask my mom, oh, can we have, whatever, can we have cake? Can we have, this or that? And she would get mad with me because again, being autistic, I'd be focused, and if I wanted cake, I would ask for cake, every single minute, until I would get cake. So eventually she got tired, and when I was about 12, she got tired and she said, you know what, if you want cake, make it yourself. So I used to live about 5 minutes from the public library, and there's 5 people in my family. I have a brother and a sister, and every library card could get 5 books. So I took everybody's library cards and I went down to the library, got 25 books on cooking. I brought it home, read it all that same day. Next day, went back and got another 25, and I learned all about the techniques and the theory and the chemistry of cooking. And then I started cooking. And from the time I was 12 to the time I left home, I pretty much cooked every meal or every dinner at home, and we had big dinner parties on the weekends and stuff like that. So it just kind of naturally, since I was experienced with cooking, when I was started looking for ways to pay for school, I took a job at a restaurant, and I just kind of got promoted really quickly. And I worked at a lot of cool restaurants. I worked in Chateau Frontenac, the big castle you see in Quebec, among all other places. And it's one of those things that, to me, working in the kitchen is so stressful and it's so chaotic, and there's so many things going on at the same time. You have no choice, but you have to kind of get in the zone, and you have to focus, and you have to be very methodical about, okay, I need to cook the steak for this long, the fish for this long, and those tips that I've learned to project manage the kitchen are the same tips that I use now to manage a project in IT.
So you went from the stressful environment of the kitchen to the easy breezy life of SharePoint, right? So
Yeah.
so is there like a Hugo signature dish? Like if you had to go be on a show like Beat Bobby Flay or something like that, right? What is your dish?
Good question. I have a giant like pizza oven in my backyard. So what my neighbors, when they smell the pizza oven, because it's a wood burning pizza oven, when they smell the pizza oven, they know they should come and visit. So it's one of my, I don't want to say it's a
I'll be
specialty.
there soon. Let me go get on.
Uh, no, it's actually very frequent that at the end of a project, I'll have the whole team over to my house and I'll make a big dinner or something.
So on the chef side of things, are there chefs in the world that have influenced you a lot? So you cook pizza, but I assume when you read the books, there were probably French books, culinary books on the technique
Oh
of
yeah.
cooking, since the French kind of invented real cooking. Um, or at least
Yeah.
the techniques that people employ today. So what type of chef inspires you, if you were to pick
You
someone?
know, I would say that probably one of my favorite chefs, and I don't think he's actually a chef, but favorite, cooking guy is really Alton Brown, because he's really all about the science of cooking, and he doesn't give you a recipe as much as he gives you a formula. You need to have this much acid and this much, this proportion of liquid to solids, and so on and so forth.
The
Which is really
chemistry
what it's
behind it,
about.
right?
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
chemistry.
Good Eats, I think, was his show, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Love that
Oh
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
Good Eats. He was on Iron Chef once, and Cutthroat
Yeah.
Kitchen he was on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's just, he's very no nonsense about his stuff. He hates unitaskers. You shouldn't buy a tool that does this one thing. It should do a whole bunch of things. I just like the way he works. Like, to me, when I was a kid, when I was understanding what's the difference between baking soda and baking powder, and why the cake recipes have baking soda and some have baking powder and some have both, and it turns out it's all about how much acid is in the recipe, and things like that. It was fascinating to me. I Not fascinating to everybody, I understand, but for me, how things work is very important.
I think
Cool.
baking, especially too, it's a complex process to make really good baked goods, right? Like the chemistry behind
Yeah.
baking a cake, it's easy for us when we just grab a box and we put it into a bowl, we mix it, it's in a pan. But really, like baking good baked goods is so much harder than baking a good dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do they say?
Behind it is so different.
Cooking is an art form, baking is a science, I think, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
so that's why I'm a big fan of baking. Obviously, baking breads and cakes and things like that.
So another chef question, just because I have to. I like
Oh yeah.
going. Chefs have, or generally speaking, a preference on knives, and I also have preferences on knives. What is your go-to brand for knives, and why?
Okay, this is gonna sound weird. I like the super sharp Chinese cleavers. I don't really care the brand. Like, I've just learned really early to use the big scary cleavers, and I use them to do fine knife work. I've had a lot of chefs that made fun of me for that, but again, it's one of those things where you can do so many things with those knives. Like, you can carry things, you can chop things, you can smash things. It's If you get started, then you don't want to cut yourself. I recommend buy yourself a Chinese cleaver at the Chinese store. They're cheap and they're great.
So,
And
the key question then is, has that carried over? Like, do you take it with you when you go to project requirement gathering sessions?
Hugo, when did you move to Toronto?
Good question. It's going to be 25 years, I guess now. Yeah.
So has that been a huge influence on the foods you cook and the foods that you eat? Because you mentioned in the questions that we asked prior, that your favorite foods come from Asia, and as I mentioned earlier, that Toronto is a fairly has a large population of Asian influence. So
Yeah.
did that have an effect on your cooking and your favorite foods?
I mean, not as much. When I moved to Ontario, I mean, I felt when I moved to Ontario from Quebec, where everybody loves food, everybody loves to have a nice big meal and spend time with their friends. When I moved to Ontario, I was shocked that there was a lot more restaurant chains and things like that, which I had never really seen in Quebec. So I was not too impressed with the food in Ontario. But when I started traveling and working out around the world, I lived in Singapore for the better part of a year. And I really got to experience some amazing food there. And it is definitely a food city. Like, it's a place for people that are passionate about food. So that's where I learned to enjoy some good, like, crazy stuff like chili stingray and nonya laksa, which is a spicy curry with with coconut sauce. Really awesome stuff. I'm just drooling now that I'm talking about it.
Very cool. Now you've lived in a lot of places around the world, right? Like you're the international man of mystery, I think. You've lived in a lot of different locations we saw.
Yeah, I mean, I spent some time in Finland, Australia, South Africa, France, England, Hungary, Singapore, Germany. Well, I mean, I just keep on moving, and then when the law finds me, I keep moving again.
What was your favorite place to live? I'm gonna guess Singapore, just based on the conversation we just had. But you mentioned one of the places you love to visit is Australia. So,
Yeah.
what's your favorite place to live? Favorite place to visit?
You know what? I have to say, I loved Finland. I really enjoyed Finland. Um, when I was there, it was, it was very snowy, and it was just like a winter wonderland. I love winter. I love, being outside and being cold, and
So you got into technology through, well, you went from cooking to technology. How did you get into SharePoint? Did you just get into SharePoint? I know that you've been doing it for a long, long time. I mean, your
Mhm.
blog is called Tahoe Ninjas. Um, so can you talk about that entry point into the SharePoint world and kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
what that progression was like?
So I was actually, that's the project where I got to go to Singapore. I was hired to do a study for McKinsey and Company, who's big management consulting company, and they have an amazing knowledge management system that they use. But the study was, what is successful in knowledge management and what is not so successful. So we got to interview a lot of companies all over the world, and they wanted us to put together our findings, and they wanted us to do a presentation. So we had 6 weeks to put together a presentation, and they shipped us to Singapore to do this presentation. And we decided, you know what, let's not do a presentation, let's put together a prototype. I had just finished a project that was using Site Server, for those of you who remember that. And Site Server was a great tool. I mean, if you got it installed and it worked, it was a great tool.
I think I saw it on the History Channel once.
Yeah. you know, it was amazing. It was just zeros and ones. You had to put them together to make it work. No, but seriously, the Site Server was a great tool, but more importantly, it came with a sample that was a knowledge management site. That was great. And again, it was one of those hidden samples that if you didn't know about it, you didn't know about it. But if you like, so what we were saying is, hey, let's take Site Server, let's install it, let's configure the knowledge management components of it, and let's demo that for a presentation. Forget PowerPoint. And when we started building this, we found out that Site Server, the guys at Microsoft were saying, well, Site Server is kind of going away. It's, but there's this new thing that's coming up. It's called codename Tahoe. If you guys want to try it, we can set you up with it. So we did. We started installing Tahoe, and the one thing that Tahoe was really cool with Tahoe is it was all written in VB script. So essentially, you had all the code for this product if you could read VB script. So obviously, me being me, I cracked open every single page, every single piece of script that was in SharePoint, and just learned how it worked and everything. And then we quickly found there was a lot of gaps. We wanted to be able to do server synchronization. We wanted to have multiple servers. So we built our own synchronization engine for SharePoint 2001. We wanted to have self-serve site creation. So we built the ability for users to create their own sites. And we wanted to have user profiles. So we built the ability to index Active Directory users and create user profiles. And while we were doing this, Microsoft sent people from the SharePoint product team to Singapore twice to come see what we were building. I mean, I don't want to take the credit for it because it was just right there. But it was great to see that later versions of SharePoint started doing self site, or if I could speak, self-serve site creation, user profile, and synchronization and things like that. So I've just been working with SharePoint ever since. Yeah.
So you've been in the community a long time, maybe even before there was a community for SharePoint. What has inspired you to contribute? Because you're a huge contributor to the community. What has inspired you to contribute and be as active as you are?
It's funny because for maybe the last, I would say, 9 years, I was kind of quiet because having two autistic kids, I was kind of trying to focus more on their needs, and I always felt like I didn't have anything interesting to say. To me, if I can learn it, everybody else can learn it, and that was my attitude. I was always happy to share what I knew, but um, you know, I just felt like I didn't have anything interesting to say. And then one day, one of my dearest friends kind of said to me, you're looking at it the wrong way. Like, you're assuming that everybody has been working with SharePoint for the last 19 years, and that's not the case. There's some people that are just starting with SharePoint, and those people would definitely appreciate any kind of piece of advice you have, and things like that. And so when I first started blogging, I had a hard time wanting to, like, I felt like I was being obnoxious by telling people, oh, this is how SharePoint works and this is how you should do things. So the first few blog posts, they were more about, here's a note to myself. If next time I want to remember how to create a link to a Delph profile, I'm going to write a blog post so that next time I search for it and I Google it, I'll find it. And it's actually happened to me a few times. Well, I'll Google something and I'll be like, that article looks familiar. And it turns out it's something I've written. And that's how I started. And then I just got lots of great encouragement from the community. People kind of telling me they appreciated what I was writing. And that's when I started doing more of okay, well, let me share a bit more about some stuff that I find interesting. But it's always my view on it is, I think that together as a community, we can do a lot more than alone. So I'd rather share what I find so that someone else can build something amazing, and maybe I'll learn something from them as well.
Excellent.
So there's some really good advice in there, and it's something that Scott Hanselman also is a proponent for and like really preaches about. Is that if someone asks you a question, you could email them back, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's longer than 3 or 5 sentences, put it online. Let other people consume it, right? It's obviously more complex than an email. Plus, it also becomes, like you said, a repository for you to look back, like your own knowledge management center, where you can just say, oh, I did this once, let me go look on my own blog, right? Yeah. But that's a great way to really get into the community, is just take your notes and just publish them, right? People will find value in it. So you do speak a lot. You are on the regular special interest group calls, showing basically rewriting all the first-party components that Microsoft has, which everyone appreciates because we all want those things. So what other type of speaking events do you do besides just those SIG calls?
Recently, I just started something called the Toronto Citizen Developer User Group, and our first meeting is going to be on October 2nd. But it's really about empowering those citizen developers, the people who are not coders for a living, but who want to make a difference in their organization. They want to fix a form or workflow or a dashboard, the whole thing is, according to Forrester, in 2024, there's going to be a deficit in the United States alone of about 500,000 developers. And if we ever want to achieve the digital transformation that we're looking for, we're going to have to find other people more. So either every single person that's going to school now has to be a developer, or we have to start empowering the people that want to make a change. And that's what the Toronto Citizen Developer User Group is about.
Are you guys going to do it remotely? Are you going to have like a Teams call so other people can join in?
Yeah, so the first one we're actually doing it live where you have to be there, but that was the feedback we saw in all the user groups, like the SharePoint user group, SharePoint Saturdays. Everybody wants to be able to attend remotely. So after the first event, we're going to do them remotely as well as encouraging remote presenters. We really want to make this, for everyone. We don't care. I mean, it's called the Toronto User Group, but we don't care where you're from. If you have something to share, if you're passionate about this, you have a place, to present and to participate.
You're
Yeah,
also
go ahead.
speaking at SharePoint Saturday, New England /
Yes.
Boston, October. What are you talking about?
So I'm talking about creating. It's actually SharePoint web part design for non-designers. So it's about there's this law of user experience that says that the more aesthetic something looks, the more people have believe that it's user friendly and that's easy to use. And most IT guys, most developers don't really care about how something looks, right? It's going to be green with Comic Sans font and it's going to look ugly, but it works. And if you think about it, as a developer, I've just built this really amazing functionality that does something really, really cool. So who cares what it looks like? But for your users that don't really get to appreciate the effort you went through, they really care about how shiny it looks and how beautiful it looks. Now,
Yeah,
fortunately,
I agree actually, because I always say if it could cure cancer, but if it doesn't look good and doesn't feel good, people still won't use it.
Yeah. Well, the example I always use is I say, like, look, if you went to see Iron Man and you're watching the movie and all of a sudden you see the wires that's pulling Iron Man in the sky, you're gonna be like, oh, come on, like it's you could do a bit more effort. Now, that Iron Man doesn't exist for real, and so you shouldn't be shocked that he's not actually flying. But it's just something where you just broke the trust when you see the wire and you say, yeah, this is crappy, this is poor quality. It breaks the trust, and that's what this presentation is about. There's tons of resources out there. There's PNP controls, there's Office UI Fabric components that you can use. And there's lots of samples either built into SharePoint or in the SharePoint samples repo that you can leverage to try to build something without being a designer. And that's really what my presentation is about.
Do you have any recommendations for people to get involved in the community?
Well, yes, definitely. Like, again, I'll give you the advice that my friend gave me, which is don't assume that everybody is at the same level as you. It doesn't matter whether you just started and you learned something or you've been doing it for 20 years. If you've got something that is useful to you, share it. Someone is bound to find it useful. If you have something that you need to remember, then maybe instead of just putting it on your desktop where you're the only person that can see it, share it somewhere else, put it on a blog or go to Stack Overflow and start answering things. Now, if you solve a problem and you're passionate about it the way I am and you want to share with it, I think the scariest thing is that people are afraid that they're going to look stupid or that people are going to think their samples are dumb. The community, the SharePoint community, has always been very awesome and very helpful. And David, I mean, you've been amazing with the community, offering to help anybody that wants to start a contribution. I don't think that I've ever had any instance in the PNP community where someone made me feel stupid because I asked a question or I submitted something that had a bug in it. Right. And then the other thing is, if you want to speak, one of my mentors at McKinsey, he teaches everybody at McKinsey how to do public speaking and presentations. His name is Gene Zelazny, and he says, if you're nervous about presenting in front of people, that's a good thing because that means you respect your audience and you don't want to waste their time. So, the illusion that you're going to be able to present and not be nervous about presenting, that's a fallacy, because if you're not nervous, then there's probably something wrong. You probably don't care about your audience and maybe you shouldn't be speaking. But if
Yeah.
you're passionate about it and people see that you're passionate and you make a mistake, usually people will be really forgiving. You'll remember you made a mistake, but nobody else in the audience will remember it. No, and the other thing that I've made a point, I've always felt that, when people are with the anonymity of the social network, people have a tendency to be really nasty to each other. And my one thing that I've always promised myself is no matter what I'm tweeting or when I'm blogging, it's positive. It's not nasty. I don't even, if someone posts something that's somewhat negative, I won't like it or I won't do anything like that. I'm just not encouraging that kind of behavior.
So Hugo, where are some of the places that everybody in the community can go find some of these blog posts that you've been talking about?
So my blog is tahoeninjas.blog, and I tend to write a lot, and I apologize. Sometimes I write very long blog posts, but I like to explain the whole logic behind some code and stuff like that. The other thing that I like to do in my blog is to write what I call interactive posts, where instead of giving you boring, hard-coded, instructions, I like to write these blog posts where you just put your information at the top of the blog, and all the instructions in the blog are customized to you. So, for example, my blog on how to contribute in a PNP repo. You just plug the stuff and it gives you all the instructions. Twitter is probably the best way to reach out to me, and I love it when people submit questions and things like that, because to me it's like if you ask me about something that I know about, I'm super excited to get to share my passion. If you ask me about something I don't know, I'm even more excited because it's great. It's something I didn't realize I didn't know. So please don't be shy. I do participate on Stack Overflow, and I try to keep up, but those are pretty much the places to get a hold of me. And if you see me at a conference, please don't be shy to talk to me. Again, I am autistic. I can come across as awkward sometimes, especially if it's really loud, because it takes me a lot of focus to try to focus only on you versus everything else that's happening around me. But I'm always happy to meet people.
Well, we appreciate you being on the show today and joining us as the guest. It's been a blast. Definitely fantastic to see the personal side of everybody in the community. So we appreciate you spending an hour with us.
And I wanted to thank you guys for what you are doing to the community, because there's a lot of people out there that are awesome, and it's always interesting to see the people behind the blog and behind the pull requests. So thank you for doing that. We appreciate it.
Appreciate that. And to continue that, we do have a sign-up sheet on the website on Dave's blog where you can fill out a form if you want to be on the show. So if you think you're interesting and you have something that you want to share, sign up, and we'll get in contact with you.
Yes, we want everybody. So everybody's got a unique story to tell. We want to help tell them all.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.